All right, welcome back for chapter 4, week 5. We're going to get into the weeds here on some conditional operators, how you make the program do what you want it to, when you want it to do it. We'll talk about if statements, loops, and there's a lot of questions on your homework about conditional operators, so make sure you pay close attention to the reading, what the conditional operators are. It's going to be a little book intensive this week, so make sure you read it and understand it. But the assignments are going to be as normal. So you'll do your self-test exercises. There's a lot of questions on your conditional operators, like the double equal and triple equal sign. If you remember, when we do a variable, we declare the variable, we write var, the variable name, and then in one equal sign. So we're assigning it a value. With two equal signs, we're checking the value of the variable against another variable to see if they're the same. And if they're the same value, then the statement will be true. The triple is we're checking the value and the type, see if they're both the same. You don't use that a whole lot, but you should know what it does. If you're having difficulty with that table, go back and read the book again, because those are important. But it's not difficult once you figure it out. And then, of course, there's going to be a lot of math this week and the different functions and methods that the built-in math tool does. So if you have any questions with that, just send me an email. I'll do my best to help you. And then the assignment this week, we'll get into that a little bit later. We're just gonna build on what we did last week. So you'll take that same assignment and we'll just add to it. But for now, let's take a look at some other stuff. This and this. Change my view up a little bit. Let's get rid of that. Okay. So hopefully you should be able to see my big screen here. You don't see my mouse. I don't like that. You can't see my mouse, so when I point at something, I will have to highlight it. Oh, yeah, there you go. There it goes. Hey, look at that. And then on the other side, I have, this is kind of like a demo here. We're going to talk about if statements. So I just have a plain HTML, what do I do? HTML page here. All it is I've got a div with an input type in here, my little input up here, and a button that has an on-click event, and then another div with another button and an on-click event. We're going to check and count. And this week it's all about JSS, or JavaScript. So we take a look at this code here. And the first function declared a function named check, right? So that's going to be what happens when you click this button on the HTML. The first thing we're doing is I'm going to declare a variable n, and that's going to be equal to the element ID with the ID of num, ID num, name num, and it's going to take that value. So whatever value is put in this box is going to equal n. So n is equal 5 right now. And then here's an if statement, a very simple if statement. If n, which is 5 at this point, is less than or equal to 5, it is going to write into the HTML right underneath the check button that the number is 5 or greater. Else, or otherwise, if it is greater than 5, then it's going to write that the number is less than 5. I may have confused myself there, but just take a look. You can click check. The number is 5 or greater because n was equal to 5, which is, it is the less than or equal to. It's equal to 5. So that is inclusive. It's going to include 5. If I put 4 in here, it's going to say it's less than 5. And if I put 6 in here, it's going to say it's greater than 5. So that's what it's doing right now. We can do that with any number on the planet. Well, not pluses. Any number, obviously, that's greater than 5. Oh, I didn't refresh. Hold on. I had to take some code out. Refresh. 659, blah, blah, blah. Check. Okay. So that works. And that's what a conditional statement is. This is if, that's a condition. If n is greater than or equal to 5. Otherwise, it's going to do something else. You have to give it 2 things to do, and it's going to split based on the condition. A nested if statement, like just a second ago, you saw that pop up. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to throw that in here. We're going to do if it is for numbers greater than 10, ask it to put in something or ask for a different variable. So if n is greater than or equal to 10, so this is, again, it's going to be inclusive. We'll just do an alert. And of course, you can do whatever you like for these conditions. I just decided to, if it's greater than 10. And inside this if statement, we're going to have to move all this stuff into this if statement and properly indent it. This, again, indentation when you're doing HTML and JavaScript, it's important for readability. So what do you think is going to happen at this point? Oh, let's put the else in here. If else. Nope. So this is another good thing about using an IDE. Sometimes when you start nesting stuff, you forget where you stop and start. And each statement, like this if condition, whatever's going to occur when this is triggered has to be contained within these brackets. So it'll just execute this and nothing else. But when you start moving stuff around, you may get confused as to what brackets are where. This looks right. Let's see what happens. Save all, refresh. We're going here, type 5. That still works. 4 still works. 6 still works like it's supposed to. So if we put in 10, it should fire off this. So each time it's doing it, but initially it was checking this statement first. But since this statement is all nested within this statement, it has to check this one first. And so far, that statement has not been true. So it'll skip it and come down here to the else. This time, the statement is true. And let's see what happens. We'll get an alert. It says, please enter a number less than 10. So that works. And this is the concept of a nested if. So if one condition is met and you have other conditions, you can keep on nesting that. So let's see, negative values. How can we put that in there? You can do or. Things like this. Is less than 0. Let's do less than or equal to 0. So now I've got this condition checking if the number is greater than 10 or if it's less than 0, it's going to fire off that alert, right? So let's refresh. and put in 0, and it does fire off, but we have it saying something different. So we needed to do something different, right? Let's can put if in. You can do this 2 different ways. You can do this a bunch of different ways, and that's the thing about coding that's really nice, is that there are a bunch of ways to accomplish the same thing. Oh my goodness. That's there. All right, don't forget to put your parentheses in here when you do a conditional statement. And we'll do another alert. So now we have, it's going to check initially if it's less than 0, greater than 10. And when that fires off, it's got to look again and say, well, which one is it? Is it greater than 10 or less than 0? And this is called an else if, because we don't want to actually may not need that. It may just need to do else. Let's see what happens. But you can keep if statements going with else if, else if. So it'll check the first one, and if that's not right, it'll check the second one, check the third one, until it gets to one that is correct, or it gets all the way to the bottom for the otherwise or else statement. So let's save this, save all, refresh, and then let's see. Let's do 4, 5, 6. 4 works, 5 works, 6 works. If we put in 10, that works. And it says please enter number less than 10. And then if we put in 0, please enter a number greater than 0. And this is, I didn't put this little prompt in here. That's just something the browser's doing, because you're getting a lot of alerts from the same thing. So the browser thinks that it's annoying you. So that is an if statement, a nested if else statements, and that's how they work with conditions. Now let's look at the bottom one here. This is a loop. This is an array. This is how you declare an array, and you should see that in the book. In the same way, you declare that it's a variable, you give it a name, and then you tell it what is in that array. And this array is the numbers 1 through 10. Something that you have to remember is that the computer starts counting at 0. So there are 10 items in this array. They are going to be numbered 0 through 9. So the number 1 here is the first item in the array. It's going to be item 0. We call that the index of 0. So if you just want to pull that 1 out, you would reference the index of 0, not 1. So this is just going to print the string, and then this is how we do a counter. And I'll show you how this works. So I just push the count button on the HTML. You get 2 outputs here. The first one, I told it to get the 4 element on the HTML. And if you look at the HTML, that is the ID for that div. And the only thing in it is the button. So it looks in there, and it's going to print the text, printed string, with a break. It's going to print that break in here just to get it so it's not printing behind that count. It separates it, gives it another line, and then it prints the string. And when you just call the string, the S by its name, or the array by its name, it's going to print the whole thing out on the same line with commas, because that's pretty neat. If you want to print it up and down, like you see the second thing here, 1 through 10, you have to do what a for loop, and they'll go over these in the book as well. And this is how you do a for loop. So there are 3 different things happening right here when you create this loop. The first thing you're doing is declaring a variable, and you're naming it I. You'll see it's pretty common for counters to be named I. I'm not sure why. That's something that I just noticed everybody does, or in every class I've ever been in, that's the way I was taught. But you can name it like counter if you want to have a descriptive name so you know what it is and what it's doing. But in this case, it's just I, and it is equal to 0. This semicolon says, okay, that's the end of this first statement. The second statement here does some pretty cool stuff. So it's going to say the value of I, whatever that is, as long as it is less than the length, this is a length function, so we're naming the variable, or the array, dot length, array dot length, and it is going to count each one of these indexes to figure out how long the array is. This is a good way to, like in this case, we know how many things are in this array, but a lot of times you won't. So instead of just putting a number in there, like I could switch that out and just put 10 in there, and my program would work right with this particular variable. But if that array ever changed, it wouldn't work. So we want to do the name of the variable and its length. That way, if I decide to add to it and put 11 in here, it'll still work. And then that ends that statement. So there's 2 statements, and there's one more statement in this. So when it's finished doing those things, it's going to increment the value of I. So in the first time it goes through this loop, I is going to be 0, because that's what we told it. It's going to look at I and then the length of the array and say, okay, well, I is less than the length. So it's going to first thing it's going to do is run this code. And what it's going to do is print a break character and the value that's in S at the index of I. So in this first one, it's going to be S0, which is the 1. And as soon as it runs this code, it's going to increment I. So I is no longer 0, it then becomes 1. Does the same thing, looks and says, okay, it's still smaller than the string. We're going to increment it, and that's going to be 2, and then we're going to print out the last one. So this is going to become S1, and that index is the number 2. And it keeps doing that until the variable I it becomes greater than, or equal to, greater than, the length of the string. So we'll do that 10 times, and then it'll say, okay, well, this condition is no longer true. We'll stop the loop, and it breaks that loop. I hope that makes sense. All right, so that is it for my little lesson. I hope you understood it. If you don't, please send me an email. If between this and the course material, the videos in Cengage, the book in Cengage, if you're not understanding what's going on, please let me know, and I'll see if I can describe it another way. We are going to work on the assignment for this week, which is we're gonna keep working on that fluid calculator, but we're going to change a few things. We're going to put some buttons in there so you can choose between gallons and liters, and get rid of the slider. You just put in a number. We're gonna have to do a little validation. Oh, and we're going to we're gonna do a few things with tables and how to create them dynamically. So instead of coding them in HTML, you will write a function in JavaScript that will write the code in HTML for you. Pretty neat. Let's do that. So first thing we need to do is, this is my folder from last week. All I'm going to do is copy and paste it wherever you want to copy and paste it. And then I'm going to change the name of it. So this is going to be chapter 4. And then you can, well, do whatever with that. So I'm going to open this folder with Visual Studio. Yeah, I need to close this. Open a new Visual Studio. Open a local folder. And mine is right on the desktop. Any day. Open. Okay, it doesn't open the folder files for you. But this is last week's project. When we finished up last week, this is last week's project. We're going to rename everything and make it a chapter 4. So the first thing you need to do, you don't have to, but it will make it life easier. So I'm going to change all these chapter 3 file names to chapter 4. And then we'll have to go into the code and do the same so that everything continues to work. So we have an info page. And up here, the links are very important because we're going to change all these chapter 3, JavaScript, CSS, and that should be all in that one. Interface page, I changed those to 4. Looks like it. Go into the JavaScript, change the page names. That should work, and I don't think there's anything in CSS. Nope, nothing in CSS. So, all right, what we are going to do, the info page is going to stay the same. And before we do anything else, make sure go to your start button, type CMD, get that command prompt, navigate to the folder that you're in. Oop. Remember, it's CD for change directory, desktop for me, and then chapter 4. Now that I'm in that directory, I can do node server.js. Remember, we have to do this so that the pages recognize this local server and are able to bounce back and forth between each other. Hit enter, and because we just copied everything over, this should work easy, and we don't have to go through all the other stuff that we'll dive deeper in chapter 8 with. So once that's running, don't close this, just minimize it. And then you can go to your folder. Desktop chapter 4. And you can open that info.html page, and it should look just like it did last week. Remember to type in 127.1 or 0.0.1. We want to do the port 8080, and then HTML, the name of your actual file. When we do that, nothing should change. We're just now bouncing it through that local server. All right, let's scoot this over here. Open this up here. Give a little room. Okay, I was waiting for the buttons to change size. Let me see if I can make this look a little better for you. All right, we got some views. I hope you can see everything on the screen and it's not too small. The info page is going to stay the same as last week, and the interface page, we're going to change this up. Instead of the slider, we're going to put a couple radio buttons in there so it will do the calculation from gallons to liters or from liters to gallons based on the condition. If you see where we're going, we're going to put in some conditional operators. All right, so we're going to do all this in, well, the HTML actually changes a little bit. So we are going to, let's see, look at the interface page. What are we going to change? We need to, instead of this input, we're going to get rid of that and put in some other stuff. So we talked about field sets. Well, we didn't talk about it, but you should have read about it in the book. And we're going to do a little bit of that. So let's get rid of everything in the content, so we have a clean slate. And the first thing we're going to do is enter a field set. Field set. Data role. It's going to be choose. That way you have your options, right? We're going to add a legend at the top and put some text in there. So this is going to be at the top telling folks, you know, kind of what's in this field set. You're looking at radio buttons, you're going to choose from gallons and liters. You kind of have to have a picture in your head of what it's going to look like before you start going, or before you start doing it. But once you get that picture, you'll know what you want. And we're going to do radio buttons. They're not going to look like radio buttons because of the way jQuery does stuff and because of the way we're actually going to format it. But this first one, well, so this is going to be, yeah, all right. We're going to give it a name of units and an ID of gallons. This will be our gallons button. And the value is going to be gallons as well. And then we're going to create another one. Type, let's go to radio. It's going to be, give it the same name so that radio buttons are unique input types because they work together. This way they have the same name so that if you select one, the other one deselects and you don't have more than one radio button selected at the same time. But this one, the ID is going to be liters. And the value is going to be liters. And in order for this to look correctly, or so these are just the radio buttons. There's nothing written on the button, so the user isn't going to know what they are. So to do, we'll do that. We'll do labels like we did last week, and it's gonna be, you know, label 4 gallons, and the text is going to be gallons. And then we'll do another label for liters. Liters, litris. I don't know if I'm spelling that right. L-I-T-E-R-S. I think so. Anyway, there's your labels. We're going to end this field set. And let's save and refresh and see what this looks like. So now we have a gallons and a liters button. Because they're named the same, they're in the same group, you can only have one selected at the same time, just like normal radio buttons. You know, you can only select one at a time, and you can add as many as you want. As long as they have the same name, they'll be part of that group. All right, so after the radio buttons, we need to put back in our display at the bottom for, you know, whatever results. How many gallons, how many liters is equal to how many gallons, and that kind of thing. It's going to be just a touch different than last week because we're going to have to do the calculations two different ways. We'll start with a label for quantity. And then this time I'm going to put an input. It's not a slider, it'll be a little text box or a number. It's expecting a number. Call it quantity, and give it the ID, same name. Remember, these are so that we can address them later in the JavaScript. We can get the element by the ID of quantity and change the value. A little break in here. And we'll have it do our display function. A new button to do display function. If you didn't delete it, then you can just use the one from last week. Another little break and a table for our results, right? And we just need one row with 2 data types. The first one will just be text. Oops, you want to do that. And this is the one that is going to hold our data. So right now it's going to be empty, but remember we need to give it an ID so that we can address it. Again, you can name these whatever you want, whatever's easiest for you, but this works for me. So this should be good. File, save all, refresh this. Now we have our radio buttons. We have where you can enter quantity and you can put whatever number in here. And then when you hit display, we haven't done the JavaScript yet. When you hit display, it should display. We're going to have it display. If the gallons button is checked, it's going to be how many gallons were entered. 20 gallons equals however many liters. And if the liters button, it should say 20 liters equals however many gallons. So that's all for the HTML. Now we'll go back into the JavaScript. And we will have to change this function a little bit. It's going to be a little longer. We have to do some nested if else. We still have, let's see. I'm just going to start over from scratch. We have our function, and the first thing we need is to get the variable quantity, and that is on the document. You meant docket element by ID, and what did we name that? Quantity. If you forget, which I often do, just go back to your interface page and see what we named it, what that ID is. That's right. So the input type, the ID is quantity. So whatever they put in this input, that is going to be the value of quantity in our JavaScript. So we need to get that value, and then we need to get, all right, the way I'm going to do this is we have to check and see which one of these buttons is checked. I'm just going to check one of them since there's only 2. And to do that, we are going to declare a variable, call it gallons, because we're going to check the gallon, or gal, because we're going to check the gallons button. And we go to the document, get element by ID, and that ID was gallons. So what this is going to do, this line of code right here, is simply it's going to check this group of radio buttons, but it's only going to check the gallon button and see if it is checked, because in this fork there's only 2 options. It's either gallons or liters. So if it's not gallons, it has to be liters. So we're just checking one button. And then if gal is checked, meaning if that variable returns as being checked or selected like this, then we want to do something. And if you remember, you probably don't, but if you, did I close? Nope, in the course. If you look back, we have to do some validation. we have to make sure that the user cannot enter more than 1,000 gallons or 4,000 liters. So we're going to do a couple nested statements here. So if gallons is checked, and if the quantity is less than 1,000, so if this variable is okay, so in order to get this variable, it has to reach out to the document and look at this. If this is less than 1,000, we're going to do something. And we're going to send an alert. These alerts are great. I'll tell you what, it's a very simple way to, when you run into a problem, something's not working, your function isn't working, or it's breaking, you can throw alerts into different places so you can see where your function breaks or what's going on. And they are a lifesaver once you figure out how to use them. It's really nice. Uh, 1,000 gallons. So as long as the quantity is less than 1,000 and gallons is checked, it's going to throw this, it'll work. But if it's more than 1,000, it will throw this alert. So if the alert is not thrown, we want it to actually do what it's supposed to do and do the calculation. And we want to put that calculation into the table. Inner HTML, just like we did last week. Make sure you put your spaces in here or it won't look right. We'll put equal sign in there too. .789. And yeah, so 2 fixed. And we'll 2 decimal points, keep it clean, plus liters, space liters. All right, so what we just did in this long line of code, the if statement is going to say if gallons is checked. So it goes back here, it goes to the document, it looks at gallons, it says is it checked or not, and then it collects that in the gallon. And then we check, is gallons checked? If it is checked, we need to look at the number in the input. If that number, quantity, that we declared as the quantity variable is less than 1,000, if it's more than 1,000, it's going to throw this alert. If it's not, which means it's a less, because it's only 2 options, either more or less than 1,000. We should do an equals to in there. I'll just leave it like this. Yeah, because we want it to be inclusive of that. You can put 1,000 gallons in there, but if you put 1,001, it won't work. So if it's less than 1,000, it'll skip this and go to the else, and then it will. I never really noticed this before, but the statements as you write them seem to actually work in reverse. It's going to do the calculation. It's going to reach out to the document, find this quantity display, which is this right here, that little 0, and it's going to change it. And the HTML is going to change. And what it's going to write is the quantity, what that number is here. Then it's going to add gallons equals text. Then it's going to do the calculation, that number divided by 3.789, and then reduce the amount of digits behind the decimal point to 2. And then it's going to add the text liters with the period. And if everything's working right, this should work. Let's just save and see if this so far actually works. So I saved, I refreshed, gallons is checked, 20 gallons in here. If we click display, it does it. Thank goodness. So here is this long statement here. After the equal sign gives you this right here. It just says the quantity's 20, then it puts in the gallons equals, and then does the math, puts that number in there, plus the liters text. So that's pretty simple. Now we need to finish this. We need to make sure liters works and liters is validated. So we will go do another if statement. So inside here, this if statement is inside this if statement, but we don't have an else for that yet. So this is going to what is going to fire off if gallons is not checked, and the only other thing that it can possibly be is that liters is checked. So either gallons or liters is going to be checked, and this is if liters is checked. So we're just going to do if the quantity is greater than 4,000, because we're doing the validation for liters. We need to send another alert. Please, the quantity must be less than 4,000 liters. And then else, we're going to do this whole same thing, but backwards. So I'm just going to copy and paste it and then change it a little bit. So we're going to get the same thing. We're going to grab the same quantity. We're going to change it. And instead, this is going to be liters. We're going to change this to multiply because we're doing it in reverse, and then this to gallons. That should work. Let's save it. Save all. Refresh. If we go to liters now, make sure liters is checked. We can keep 20 in there, hit display, and now it does it differently. So we've gotten down to this line of code. It checked to see if gallons was checked, and it was not. So it skipped this if statement and went to the else. And then if the quantity is less than, then it checked to see if it's less than 4,000, which it is. It skipped this and went to this else, and then did this code here, did this little calculation, threw everything in. So it works. And now you should be able to switch back to gallons, hit display again, and then it will change back to what it was. Hit liters, and it should just work. Every time you hit that button, it'll fire off this function, and it should work like that. Let's check the validation. So I can do 1,000 gallons, but if I put in 1,001, I get the alert. Say, hey, it's got to be less than 1,000. And if I check liters, I can do up to 4,000 liters and display it, and that works. But if I do 4,001 and display it, I should get this this validation alert. So far, all of our code works. That's awesome. Makes me feel good. And that is all we're going to do with the interface page. What's new this week is we're going to add another page. We're going to add another button up at the top, and we're going to work on some dynamic table creation. So we need a new file. Let's go add new file, and this will be, call it chapter 4 arrays. Sure, call it whatever you want. And I think that I'm going to go ahead and copy the info page. Really, you just want the headers and stuff. I'm just going to copy it all, assuming everything is spelled correctly on this page, and paste it in here. And that didn't work. Copy, Control A, Control C, Control A, Control V. Okay. So we have, why is that not backspacing? Oh, sorry. I don't know what this yellow line is. Anyway, we have an arrays page. Let's see what it looks like. If we go, we got to add another button to all of our pages. So we'll go make another list item in here. Anchor on click, and we're gonna have to make another function. Call it arrays because we're going to the arrays page. And just say arrays on it. Okay, so if I save file, save all, refresh, and I go to the information page, Now we have 3 buttons at the top on the informations page. We need to add that also to the interface. Just make a line, copy it in there, file, save all, refresh, go to the interface page, and you should have buttons. We haven't done the function yet for arrays, so let's go into the JavaScript, and you can just copy this function here, Control C, Control V, call it, change the name, and change the page. It is arrays, right? Yep, arrays, the HTML. And then we can save all, refresh, and then if I click on the arrays page, it goes to, we are on the arrays page. If you look up here, you can see it's on the arrays page, but we copied and pasted everything from that fluid unit conversion. So we need to go to the arrays page, and we will add that button as well. Oh, I already copied and pasted the function. Let me steal this here. Control C, arrays page, Control V. And then remember, we want to change this class, take this class from here and put it on the arrays so that that button stays light up blue and looks pretty. Save all, refresh. Now we got 3 buttons up here. And let's see, I think I'm going to get everything out of the content. Yeah, okay, so even the content I'm going to change a little bit. Let's just do this. I'm going to get rid of the whole content div, and then I'm going to create a new div, and it's going to be, I'm going to give it an ID of content table, because we're going to create a table within this div. And the only thing that we're going to put in here is a button that fires off a function to do what we want it to. Call it create table, and on the button we'll tell it to create a table. File, save all, refresh. Okay, so we got a blank screen and just a button on here that doesn't do anything yet. That's the arrays page. So what we want to do is have a JavaScript function that fires off when we click this button. And when we click this button, we want it to create a table dynamically. And every time we click that button, it should create another table. Let's go into the JavaScript, and we will create a new function. Create a table. All right, so in that, we're going to create a variable to hold the table. And then we're going to put it in the document. Create element. This creates a table in the HTML. And it's going to create it in this div, content table. JavaScript. Let's see. Content table. Append child my table. So this first line creates a table, and it stores it in the my table variable. The second line reaches out to the document and finds the div with the content table name or ID, and it appends that table, sticks it in there. So it's just an empty table at this point. And let's see, if I save and refresh, and I click the button, you can't see anything. But if I go to inspect element, If I go to inspect it, let's see, content table, you can see here that there is a table HTML has been put in there, just an empty table, nothing else. So you can't actually see it on the page because there's nothing in it, but the HTML was written when I clicked the button. All right, so we need to create a few variables here, and these are going to be array variables. 2 static variables that will populate the table, and 1 dynamic variable. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So like, we're going to declare an array, and it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know. I guess you don't need the spaces. I just always space after the comma. I don't know why. So we've got an array variable with 10 items. And then another variable with, let's put like car names or something in here. That's what I did last time. So this is an array of strings. I gotta come up with 10 of these. I guess I might know 10 car names. I don't know. Manufacturers. And there we go. Okay, so we have 2 variables here, 2 arrays. One is full of integers, one is full of strings. And the last one, we are just going to leave blank. So it is an array variable, but there's nothing in it at this point. And what we want to do is fill that up. Every time the button is pressed, we want to fill this variable and then print it into the table. So, like I showed you on the other, we have to use a counter, a for counter, or a loop, for loop. And for, just like a counter, I'm using J instead of I this time. Why? Because I can. And this time I am doing, I'm putting a number in here instead of like string length or array length like we did the last one, because I want 10 things, just so it's, this has 10 in it and this has 10 in it, and I want C to also have 10. So I'm using 10. And each time this goes through and iterates through this loop, we're going to put something in the C array at index J. And I know that can be kind of complicated to understand. So the first time it goes through, that J is going to be a 0. So we are going to address, or we're looking at the C variable at index 0 the first time through. And that's going to be the first place. Like this 1 is the 0, this forward is the 0, and these other ones. So in the first place of that, we are just going to do math random. And yeah, that'd be good. Math random. You can specify between numbers, whatever, but math random's fine. And so it's going to go through that loop 10 times, and every time it does, it's going to put an item into the C array, the variable C array. And then we'll have a whole array. In order to see what that's doing, we got to put it into the table, right? So let's do another counter, and for it's got to look at each one of these, and you have to reach in, grab each one of those indexes, and then put them into the cell with the matching number as you go through. So it's going to go through and do that each time. You need another loop to do that. I use the I here, I equals 0, as long as I is less than 10. Yeah, we'll just stick with 10. We're going to increment I. And I put this little semicolon here. That does not belong. All right, so we need a few variables in this loop. We'll do current row. And it's going to be equal to my table dot insert row, insert row -1. And this is because, remember, the computer starts counting at 0 for these variables, but I think it's going to count the tables from 1. So like the first cell is going to be 1 and not 0. So we need to minus that 1. Otherwise it'll put it in, it'll be off by 1. And the first cell is going to be equal to the current row of insert cell 0. So the first cell, the inner HTML, is going to get the A. It's going to get the array A at the index I, which the first time through is going to be 0. So it's going to be this 1, and it's going to put it in the first cell, first row. And then we need to get the second cell data from the insert row, no, row, insert cell, yep. 1, inner HTML is equal to BI. And then we're going to do the same thing with this, but C. So this is going to be third cell, current row, insert cell 2, third cell, inner HTML CI. Okay, so it's going to go through, it's going to look at the current row that we're on, and the rows start at 1, but our arrays start at 0, so we have to minus that 1. The first cell at cell 0 is going to put the A. The second cell at cell 1, so we're moving, remember you got rows and then cells, or cells and okay, rows, you got a row, sorry, you got a row with 3 cells in it, right? We just made a row with 3 cells in it. So the first row, second row, or first cell, second cell, and third cell, all in the same row. And it's going to take the index from the first array, second array, and the third array and put them all in that row. And then it's going to increment and go to the second row and to the second item in the array and put them all in there. So it doesn't build them up and down, it's going to build them across, if that makes any sense. And if I did this right, this should work. So let's save this, refresh, and click create table. So you now have a table that's been populated. It's at least this third row was created dynamically. We have the 2 static arrays, and then we created this math random one that will be different every time. If you click create table several times, you're going to get different results for this final column every time. And that's how you create a dynamic table. There are going to be times, depending on what kind of stuff your application does, where you're going to want to create things dynamically. We'll do some more of this probably later in the course. From here, if you want, and you probably should, make your pages look a little bit better. Let's see, I've got a CSS here with a wrapper. How can I make these look better? So this, I think it was the first week I talked about the wrapper. If we just give the ID of wrapper to this the data role page and save refresh. It'll change the background. You can make them look a little nicer. You can also obviously make the width and height better. Here, let me. So we can change this. I think it's supposed to be 960. It is not auto marching. But play with the CSS and see. Do this in all of them. Info interface. So I'm going to save all, refresh. So now the background's green on all of them. I got the, I need to get that fixed. I don't understand why it's not flowing, but I have my stuff styled a certain way. There's a background that I like to use for just about everything. And I'm just going to copy and paste my CSS that I have for the wrapper and the WebKits and my tables. So you can also, you style your tables in here, just, you know, table, T-A-B-L-E, and you can put a border or do whatever. Make it look nice, make it look different. Don't even have to be nice. Just do something in the CSS. So we're not getting out of practice. We haven't talked a lot about it, and there's a million things that you can do in CSS that we're not going to cover. So do a little research on your own, see what you can come up with. I like mine to look like this. Well, if I do it right. In fact, let me just do this. Save all. And I like to have that dynamic background. I don't know why. This is not auto margining. It gets smaller, which is nice, but doesn't get any bigger than that. Well, it should be auto margining. It's staying at 960 because that's what I told it to do. But this is how I like to have all my stuff. It's just pretty. I liked it. There are several websites you can go to create. You click on colors, you click on things, and it'll generate the CSS code for you. I don't care if you do that. Please go out and look at some stuff. In fact, the jQuery, jQuery.com. If you go to jQuery.com, there are a few other things. If you look at these tabs up here, there's a couple other things you can do. And you can customize jQuery to look however you want. We're just using the standard defaults throughout this course because that's what we're doing. But let's see, the UI, they got jQuery, mobile UI, or mobile. They've got Sizzle, and I don't even know what that does. QUnit, let's just see, jQuery mobile. Theme roller, here we go. If you go to theme roller, you can come in here and texts, headers, how you want your radio buttons to look, all these colors. There are a billion things you can do with jQuery, and then you just download that file and replace whatever jQuery we're using in class, and it will style things however it is that you want it. So this is a really cool website if you ever decide to get in here and mess with jQuery. I'm sure, I know I've seen websites before. But if you just look for some custom CSS stuff, there are places where you'll be able to do the same thing with your CSS. You just kind of tell them how you want it to look, and they'll write the code for you. You copy and paste it in there, and that's cool too. But I do want you to get in there and kind of work with CSS just a little bit, especially because most of you haven't done anything. So if you look at my tables, when I create a table, I've got the change to color. There's a red border, and then there's a border on the table data. Just do something that you hadn't done before so that you're still using the skills that we're learning through here. I hope the lesson was insightful and you understood everything I was saying. But if you didn't, please send me an email and we'll work on it. Thanks.